When Jyokai was being nursed, for example, she was served many dishes that were thought to promote good breast milk. After the food tasting ended and everyone began eating their appetizers, Maomao noticed something. This observation strengthened her belief that a mistake had been made in who received which dish. Lishu, the oblivious consort, was gazing at her appetizer and looked a little pale. She did not seem to like whatever was in it. However, this was the emperor's favorite dish, so it would be unconscionable not to finish what she was served. She was bravely working her way through the food. A slice of raw carp trembled in her chopsticks. Behind her, the lady-in-waiting who served as her food taster had her eyes closed. Her lips were quivering and appeared to be drawing themselves up into a slight arch. She was laughing. Maomao thought she sort of wished she hadn't seen that, then turned to the next course. If only it had been just a banquet, Lihaku thought. He did not get along with these elite types. They looked down on everyone from the lofty heights of the imperial court. What was the fun in having a party outside in the freezing cold? The wind was clawing at you at every moment. A nice meal would have been fine. They should all imitate their ancestors. They should have a drink and a bit of meat in a peach garden with a few close friends. But wherever there were nobles, there might be poison. Any ingredients, no matter how fine or how exquisitely prepared, would have gone cold by the time the food tasters were done with them. And with the warmth went at least half the flavor. He did not blame the people who checked the food for poison. But just watching the way they had to force themselves to bring a mouthful to their lips, their faces pale the entire time, almost cost him his appetite. Today, as always, he could not help feeling it was taking an inordinately long time, but in reality, it seemed that was not what was happening. Normally, the food tasters would all glance uneasily at one another as they brought their utensils to their mouths. But today a taster seemed quite eager. The petite lady-in-waiting who attended the precious consort took a mouthful of the aperitif from her silver cup. She did not glance at the other women. She swallowed slowly, then washed her mouth out as if it was no big deal. Lihaku thought she looked familiar. Then he remembered she was one of the women he had given a hair stick to earlier. She was not strikingly beautiful, but she was neat and tidy with no particular features that stood out. She would likely have been lost among the many serving women in the rear palace, most of whom were undeniably gorgeous. However, the determined look on her face suggested she could dominate others with a single glance. His initial impression was that she seemed rather aloof. But he soon realized his judgment was incorrect when she surprised him with a quick, unexpected grin, which disappeared almost as quickly as it came. Now she looked rather displeased. Despite everything, she continued to taste for poison with complete nonchalance. It was very strange. It was also the perfect way to pass the time, trying to guess what face she would make next. The young woman was given the soup, and she took a spoonful. She examined it carefully, then slowly placed a few drops on her tongue. Her eyes widened slightly, and then a rapturous smile spread across her face. A flush appeared in her cheeks, and her eyes began to water. Her lips curved upward, revealing white teeth and a plump, almost alluring red tongue. This is what made women so frightening. As she licked the last droplets from her lips, her grin was like ripe fruit. It resembled the grin of the most accomplished courtesan. The food must have been truly delicious. What could be in it to transform a completely average girl into such an enchanting creature? Or perhaps it was the preparation by the palace's inestimably talented chefs. Lihaku swallowed heavily, and just then the young woman did something unbelievable. She took a handkerchief from a pouch, put it to her lips and spat out what she had just eaten. "This is poisoned," the lady-in-waiting said, her flat expression returning to her face. Her voice held all the urgency of a bureaucrat reporting on some mundane matter, and then she vanished behind the ladies' curtain. The banquet ended in utter chaos. Chapter 19. After the festivities, a very energetic food taster you are. Maomao had just washed her mouth out and was staring vacantly into the middle distance when a most unexpected, and altogether underemployed, eunuch appeared. She could not believe he had found her so far away from the banquet. Not long before, Maomao had detected poison in the dish served just after the raw fish. She spat it out and retreated from the celebration. She guessed most ladies-in-waiting would be chastised for doing something like that. She wished she could have been more discreet, but it simply wasn't possible. This poison was the first she had tasted in so long, and it was inviting and delicious. She could practically have just swallowed it. But if a food taster eagerly swallowed whatever poison she came across, she would not be able to do her job. Maomao needed to remove herself from the situation before things got out of hand. "Good day to you, Master Jinchi." She greeted him with her usual expressionless appearance. However, she felt her cheeks were not quite as stiff as usual. Perhaps a bit of the poison was still in her system. She resented that this might make it look as if she was smiling at him. "I dare say you are the one having a good day." He grasped her arm. He looked, in fact, rather upset. "May I ask what you are doing? I am taking you to see the doctor, obviously." It would be absurd to consume poison and simply walk away. In fact, Maomao was the picture of health. As for the toxin in that dish, as long as she didn't swallow it, it could hardly hurt her. But what would have happened if she had swallowed it instead of spitting it out? Curiosity coursed through her. There was a good chance she would be starting to feel a tingle by now. "I shouldn't have spit it out. Maybe it wasn't too late to claim some of the leftover soup." She asked Jinchi if this might be feasible. "What are you, stupid?" he said, sounding scandalized. "I would prefer to say I am always eager to improve myself." She recognized that not everyone would endorse that sort of self-improvement. In any event, Jinchi now had little of his characteristic glitter. He had replaced the stick in his hair and was wearing the same elegant clothes as earlier. Wait, was his collar ever so slightly askew? It was, so that was it, the scoundrel. He had no doubt claimed he was cold as a pretext to do something smarmy. At the moment there was no honey in his voice and no lilting smile on his face. Is that sparkle something he can turn on and off? Or was he simply tired after all that had happened? Perhaps he was absent from the banquet because he had spent the entire time speaking with ladies in waiting. He may also have been speaking with civil officials, military men and eunuchs. Yes, that is what Maomao would choose. He was certainly a busy man. She wouldn't want to be in his position. He may have been beautiful, but from where she was standing he looked much younger than she suspected. Younger, perhaps. She would have to ask Gaeshun to ensure that from now on when Jinchi visited her, it was only after he had been up to something indecent. "Let me tell you something. You walked out of there looking so spry that one person actually ate the soup wondering if there was really poison in it. Who would be that stupid? There were many different kinds of poison. Some did not manifest their effects for quite a while after they were consumed. A minister is feeling numbness. The place is in an uproar. Ah, so the future of the nation was potentially at stake. I wish I'd known. We could have used this." She produced a cloth pouch from around her neck. She had hidden it just under her chest padding. It contained an emetic that she had quietly concocted the previous night. "I made it so strong it would make you cough up your stomach." "That sounds like a poison itself," Jinchi said skeptically. "We have our own medical officer here. You can leave everything in his hands." Suddenly Maomao thought of something and stopped in her tracks. "What is it?" Jinchi asked. "I have a request. There is someone I would like to bring with us if possible." Maomao was desperate to clarify something. Only one person could help her do it. "Who? Give me a name." Jinchi frowned. "The virtuous consort, Lady Lishu." "Would you call her?" Maomao replied, calm and confident. When Lishu answered the summons, she gave Jinchi a smile as pleasant as springtime. She bestowed only a look of total contempt on Maomao. It was as if she wanted to know, who is this? She restlessly rubbed her left hand with her right hand. She was very young, but she was still a woman. They tried going to the medical office, but a large crowd made it difficult. All the important people felt they had to be there. Because of this, Jinchi, Maomao and Lishu were forced to go to an unused administrative office instead. It allowed Maomao to appreciate the differences in architecture between the rear palace and the outside world. The room was vast and unadorned. Consort Lishu wore a slight pout. Maomao asked Gaeshun to send away most of Lishu's attendants. They had followed them in a group, so Maomao wanted only one attendant left with the consort. Maomao then took an antitoxin to help cool her head. She would have been perfectly safe without it. However, she wanted to be sure. She was also intrigued to see how someone else had made the drug. This caused her to vomit powerfully, bringing up the entire contents of her stomach. It was a delightful emetic. The doctor of the main court was very competent, unlike the doctor in the rear palace. Jinchi watched Maomao grin throughout the entire time she retched. It seemed he could not quite believe what he was seeing. She thought it was rather rude of him to stare at a young lady while she was vomiting. Now looking quite refreshed, Maomao bowed to Lishu. The consort looked at her with a squint. "Pardon me," Maomao said, approaching Lishu. The consort was astonished when Maomao took her left hand. Maomao rolled back the long sleeve to reveal a pale arm. "I knew it," Maomao said. She saw exactly what she had expected. A red rash stippled the normally smooth, unblemished skin. "There was something in the fish course that you shouldn't have been eating." Lishu refused to look at Maomao. "What precisely do you mean by that?" Jinchi said, his arms crossed. His heavenly comportment had quietly returned, but he still wasn't smiling. Some people simply can't eat certain things. Not just fish. Some people cannot stomach eggs or wheat or dairy products. I myself have to avoid buckwheat. Jinchi and Gaoshan both looked amazed. This came from the girl who casually ingested poison. "Leave me alone," Maomao implored them silently. She had tried to accustom herself to buckwheat, but it caused her bronchial tubes to contract and threatened her breathing. It also caused a rash, but only after it was absorbed by her stomach. This made it difficult to determine a suitable portion size, and the effects lingered for a long time. Eventually, she stopped trying to get used to it. She still hoped to try again someday. However, she would not do it here in the rear palace. If something went wrong, her only hope would be the quack doctor. "How did you know?" Lishu asked, her voice trembling. "First, let me ask you a question. How is your stomach? You do not appear to have any nausea or cramps." Maomao then offered to prepare a purgative, but consort Lishu shook her head vigorously. It was too humiliating to contemplate, right here in front of the one aristocrat with whom everyone seemed obsessed. It was Maomao's little way of getting back at Lishu for her contempt. "In that case, please be seated." Gaoshan, more solicitous than he first appeared, pulled out a chair. Lishu sat down. "The problem is that your meal was switched with Lady Gyokai's. The lady is not picky about her food, so she largely eats the same things as His Majesty." Maomao said that in this case, one or two of the ingredients had differed between their meals. "Mackerel and abalone, you cannot eat those, correct?" The consort nodded. Maomao noticed the look of astonishment on the face of the lady attending Lishu. Those who do not have such dietary restrictions do not always understand that this is more than just preference, Maomao said. In this case, the consequences seem to have been no worse than a rash. However, sometimes such foods can cause difficulty breathing or even heart problems. I would go so far as to say that if someone knowingly gave you food you can't eat, it would be like serving you poison. That word got an immediate reaction from everyone in the room. "I understand that given the circumstances you may have found it difficult to object, consort, but you put yourself in tremendous danger." Maomao's gaze drifted between the lady and her attendant. "I urge you not to forget this lesson in the future." She was talking to both of them. After a moment she added to Jinchi, "Please be sure her usual chef is aware as well." Lishu and her attendant, however, still seemed uncomprehending. Maomao explained the danger at length to the lady in waiting. She wrote down what to do if Lishu had another reaction. The woman was pale, giving little, convulsive nods. So this is what it is like to threaten somebody. The lady who had stayed with Lishu was her food taster. One who had been laughing. After consort Lishu withdrew, Maomao sensed a thick atmosphere behind her. She finally felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned a cold look on the hand's owner. It would have been better had she looked at him as she might look at an earthworm. "I am but base, and I wish you would not touch me." In less elegant words, she wanted him to move away. "You are the only one who says such things to me. I suppose everyone else is too considerate." Maomao edged away from Jinchi. She sighed as if she had heartburn and looked for Gaoshan. She hoped he might serve as her tonic, but ever loyal to his master, he looked back with an expression that said, "Please, just put up with him." "Well, I must return and report to Lady Gyokaiu," Maomao said. "Tell me why you asked that the consort's food taster come here with us," Jinchi said, suddenly springing to the heart of the matter. This was why it was so hard to deal with him. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean," Maomao said expressionlessly. "You think the one who set out the meals made the mistake then? I wouldn't know." She was going to play dumb to the very end. "Then answer me this at least. Was the virtuous consort being deliberately targeted? If there was no poison in any of the other bowls, then it would have to be deliberate. Maomao left the room as Jinchi lapsed into thought. Once she was safely outside, she slumped against the wall and let out a long breath. Chapter 20 Fingers. Upon returning to the Jade Pavilion, Maomao found herself subjected to scrupulous nursing. She was put into fresh clothes and then thrown into bed. It wasn't the cramped room she usually occupied, but a much larger spare room with a proper bed. After resting a bit on the new silk bedding, Maomao thought of the straw mat she usually slept on. She felt like she had risen from a bog into the clouds. "I've taken medicine, and there's nothing physically wrong with me," she protested. By medicine she meant the emetic, but she did not need to say that. "Don't be ridiculous. You should have seen the minister who ate that food. I don't care if you got the stuff out of your system." "There is no way you are fine and dandy," Yinghua said, pressing a damp cloth to Maomao's forehead with concern. Stupid, stupid minister, Maomao thought. She wondered if he had really managed to get it all out with the first medication he was given. However, her curiosity wasn't going to win her freedom here. She resigned herself to this fact and closed her eyes. It was an agonizingly long day. Maomao must have been more tired than she thought, because it was almost noon when she woke up. That was not good for a lady in waiting. She hopped out of bed and changed, then went looking for Hongyang. No, wait. First, Maomao went back to her own room. She wanted to find the face powder she always used. It wasn't the whitening powder everyone else was so concerned with. It was the stuff that created the freckles on her face. She used a polished sheet of bronze as a mirror. She tapped the spots around her tattoos with her fingertip, paying special attention to the ones above her nose. She thought to herself, "I am absolutely not going out without my makeup again." It was just too much trouble to explain. It occurred to Maomao that she could pretend she had used makeup to hide her freckles, but the idea embarrassed her. She would likely be expected to blush and act shy every time someone mentioned them. Maomao's stomach was rumbling, so she ate one of the leftover mooncakes as a snack. She would have liked to wipe her body down, but she did not have the time. She went directly to where the others were working. Hongyang was with consort Jayukayu, watching over Princess Lingli. She hardly looked away from the rather active young lady. She moved her so that she stayed on the carpet, or she supported chairs so they would not fall as the princess tried to stand up. She seemed quite precocious. "My sincere apologies for oversleeping," Maomao said with a bow. "Oversleeping? You should have taken the day off." Jayuko put a hand to Maomao's cheek, looking worried. "Hardly, milady. If you have need of me, please call," Maomao said. She knew full well that she was rarely given any serious work to do and would probably be left alone. "Your freckles," Jayuko said, fixing immediately on the one thing Maomao least wanted her to notice. "I feel much better with them. If milady doesn't mind." "Yes, of course," Jayuko said, letting the matter go much more readily than Maomao had expected. Maomao gave her a probing look, but Jayuko said, "Absolutely everyone wanted to know who that lady-in-waiting of mine was. I thought the questions would never end. My apologies." Maomao suspected people did not look favorably on a serving girl who declared the presence of poison, and then simply left a banquet of her own volition. She had even worried privately about being punished for it. She was relieved when no reprimand came. At least with those freckles, people won't recognize you right away. That might be for the best. Maomao thought she had been more subtle than that, but perhaps she was wrong. Where had her mistake been? Oh, and something else. "Gaeshun came by this morning looking for you. Will you see him? He looked like he had time on his hands, so I set him to weeding outside." Weeding. It was true the emperor's favorite consort was dispensing the task, but then Gaeshun was no serving girl. Perhaps he had taken on the job voluntarily. Maomao felt that Gaeshun ranked reasonably high in the hierarchy, but he also seemed a bit of a soft touch. She could see many ladies in waiting falling for him. She especially sensed that Hongyang's eyes lit up when Gaeshun was around. The chief lady-in-waiting was around 30 years old. Despite her good looks, her considerable competence had the side effect of scaring off potential suitors. "Might we borrow the sitting room?" Maomao asked. "You may. I will have him summoned immediately," Jayukayu said, taking the princess from Hongyang. Hongyang left to call Gaeshun. Maomao was about to follow her, but Jayukayu stopped her with a hand. He directed her to the sitting room instead. Gaeshun said promptly when he entered the room, "Master Jinchi sends this with his regards." He placed a cloth-wrapped package on the table. Maomao opened it to discover a silver bowl full of soup. It wasn't the soup Maomao had sampled. This was the dish from which consort Gyokyo had been about to eat. He had refused her yesterday, but in the end he had been kind enough to provide it. He was being polite, but Maomao surmised this was also an order to investigate. "Please don't eat it," Gaoshan said with a distinct look of concern. "Perish the thought," Maomao replied. But this was only because silver promotes rotting. Oxidized food was never tasty. Gaoshan did not seem to realize she had her own reason for not drinking the soup. He watched her doubtfully. Maomao stared at the bowl, careful not to touch it directly.